Good evening, everybody. Just to let you know, live stream has now started and we will begin the meeting. There's no fire alarm planned for this evening. Should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. The two exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors on the riverside behind the wood. Please do not use the exit at the back to my right. There says an exit somewhere around here. It's not currently open. And meet at Tower House car park. Hopefully everybody knows where that is. It's just down there. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. I would like to remind everyone present at this meeting that it's being minuted, recorded, filmed and made available to view in live and archive form via the Council's website. If you're seated in the public gallery, it's possible the cameras may capture your image. If you wish to avoid being filmed, it's recommended you make a member of staff aware who can direct you to where to sit. Westgate Garden gates on the riverside are locked at dusk, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. First of all, apologies, John, please.
We have apologies from Councillors Keith Bothwell and Paul Prentice, Chair.
And any substitutes?
Yes, Councillor Claire Turnbull is a substitute for Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you very much. And declarations of interest by councillors or officers. First of all, we have a generic declaration which John will read out to us. John, would you do that first, please? Thank you.
All or some councillors may have received correspondence from or spoken with applicants, agents, supporters or objectors, and some of the public speakers may also be known to members of the committee due to their work as councillors. Neither circumstance prevents councillors from participating in the meeting. However, any councillor who considers that they do not have an open mind in respect of any item on the agenda should not participate in the meeting when the relevant item is to be discussed.
Thank you. Are there any other individual interests to be declared? No. Thank you very much, everybody. Public participation. There are 7 public speakers tonight who will be heard immediately after the officer's presentation under each, well, there's only one relevant item because we're focusing on one application today. So can I move on? Simon, you ready? Yeah. Application number is item 5, application number CA 23-00484, land at the Hill, Beaksbourne, east of Beaksbourne Hill, Beaksbourne. And can I ask Simon Thomas to introduce the report? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just briefly go through these slides because we members saw this application about 6 weeks ago. So this is the application for the Hill. It was reported to committee, as I say, I think sometime in May, and the application was deferred for a number of Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Right. So this application was deferred at the meeting in May because councillors had a number of questions regarding the sustainability of the development and the infrastructure provision. So between then and now, I've looked into those questions, and the report that you have in front of you sets out the answers to those questions as far as I am concerned. So just very briefly to remind you of the site. So it's a site in Littlebourne. This is the boundary of the site. So the hill is at the top of the picture and Beaksbourne Lane is sort of down to the south east. This is a little video I did. So this is just to give you an idea of the part of the site, at least, with the hill and the houses on the hill. You can see just disappearing, the tree line on the ridge, and then the rest of the site, just to give you a flavour for it. So again, just some more photographs. As I say, in the distance, you can see the hill and the line of houses that run up the hill. Again, some more photographs. So the application is for 300 dwellings. As we said last time, there's an access was proposed where the blue arrow is. I don't know if you can see my cursor there where the blue arrow is. And initially, the applicant wanted approval for an access in that location. However, they have agreed to withdraw that request. So if outline permission is granted, then the decision on where the access is located would be a reserved matter, which would come back to the council for future consideration. One of the other features of this development is that it would also provide an access through a Beaksbourne Hill, which would allow vehicles to drive through this site and avoid the difficult junction in the centre of Littlebourne. So I'll just stop presenting now. I'll just briefly run through the report. So yeah, the report's in front of you, and it sort of explains the information that I've gathered since the last time the committee considered the application. There are a number of pieces of information that I think the councillors were very keen to see. The first one was around where the 2.2 million developer contribution for education would be likely to be spent. Kent County Council has said that it would look to prioritise the expansion of Littlebourne Primary School. That will be subject to obviously consideration of access and other factors, in terms of what that expansion would look like. But what that money would do, as far as KCC are currently concerned, is increase the capacity of the school from a 0.5 form entry school to a 1 form entry school. So it would increase double the capacity within the school. So that's what KCC are telling us. The applicant was originally proposing 11% biodiversity net gain. They've now confirmed that they are proposing 20% biodiversity net gain. They've also, I think, which is quite important, is that they've made a commitment that they will aim to deliver to net zero carbon homes, and condition 30 secures that commitment. So it requires them to aim to deliver net zero homes. And the condition is worded in the same way as the condition that we imposed on the planning application on the land south of Thanet Way. Another concern of councillors was the impact on the chalk stream from surface water runoff. Excuse me. The applicant has confirmed and agreed with Kent County Council, which is the statutory lead flood authority, that they will reduce the amount of surface water runoff from the site. So at present, the site is just a field, so water runs freely down to the water course, through the culvert, under the road, which KCC is responsible for, and then enters the chalk stream. What the applicant has agreed with the lead flood authority is that currently the amount of flow is 16.7 litres per second, and they will limit the flow to 11 litres per second, so there's approximately 35% decrease, and this will happen through water management on the site. So they'll be able to, through the development and the sustainable drainage systems, they will be able to manage that flow at peak, particularly at peak times. So that will have a positive benefit on the chalk stream, and also mean that there'll be less water passing through the culvert. But again, the culvert is Kent County Council's responsibility. Excuse me. The other big issue that the committee were concerned about is the impact of sewage disposal and how that would be managed from the site. And there was concern about an existing problem within the village where, as I understand it, during flood events, people have experienced wastewater backing up into their properties. Southern Water confirmed that they have a programme currently to seal drainage manholes to reduce the amount of water that's going back into the system. So that's already underway. But what they've also confirmed is that if planning permission is granted, the applicant will have to apply to Southern Water, as is always the case. Excuse me. Thanks. They'll have to apply to Southern Water for connection to the sewer. When that happens, they will be required to model the impacts of the development on the sewage system, and Southern Water will only allow them to connect when the design of the system is such that this development would not cause any additional impact on the wastewater system in the area. So they will only allow that connection to happen where that has been demonstrated, which is standard practice for Southern Water. So this development obviously can't in itself remedy any of the problems that currently exist, but what it must do is not cause any greater problems. And we've also, although this is a matter for Southern Water, we've also proposing a condition of the planning permission that says that the details of the sewage arrangements have to be submitted to this council for consideration. Obviously, Southern Water would be assessing the technical efficacy of that system, but we will have a kind of an overview to ensure that development happens only when that system is in place. So when arrangements for sewage water are acceptable. So we kind of keep an oversight on that particular matter. I'm aware that that was something that the councillors were particularly keen on, seeing that we have that overview as well as obviously Southern Water through its statutory function. I spoke with Stagecoach as well. What they've said is there is adequate capacity to serve the development in the bus network. They're half-hourly services from the village, so it's quite well served. And they say that this development won't exceed the current capacity that exists. Because I did ask them whether they would need any funding for improving the network, and they said no, that isn't necessary. They were also supportive of the commitment by the developer to provide a welcome pack and website that will give people information about the bus service and encourage alternative means of transport to and from the site to the car. I think the developer's also saying that they will start up a car club, 6 vehicles, which would be for the benefit of this development, but also would be usable by residents of the village, existing residents of the village. Condition 21 secures that travel plan commitment. And again, at the last committee, the councillors were very keen to see that the travel plan would be secured before development takes place, and that condition would do that. And then the final point, I think, was that the committee wanted to be certain that the housing mix would be delivered as per the council's policy, and condition 31 secures this. The report also sets out what that requirement is through the council's policy. So those are the main kind of highlights. Obviously, you've read the report and you'll see how those, in detail, how those matters have been addressed. So the recommendation is, as before, to grant permission subject to a legal agreement that secures all of these things and the conditions that are set out at the end of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Simon. So please, can we move to our speakers? Our first speaker is Ken Little. If you could come forward, please. Mr. Little, can you hear me? Yeah, we did turn the sound up a bit, but hopefully. You have 3 minutes.
Ashamed of yourselves. Anyway, let's have a look at this. The 2017 local plan is dead in the water. Get over it, it's dead. Simon Thomas said that last time we was here. It's over. 2045 was shifted. You ruled that out. You've stopped that plan. You've now got a 2040 plan. Christ knows what you're going to put in that. I've got no idea. I don't think you lot have either. Right, what's your problem? Housing numbers. What's going to happen tonight? If you don't grant planning permission here, it will go to appeal and it will cost us, the taxpayer, a lot of money. So all this jibber jabber that's going on here at my expense, I don't know what you earn, 38 grand, is it, part-time? You're going to get nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. And you're going to talk about, we're going to have a little plug that, may make the homes efficient and all that nonsense. Bottom line is, I suspect everybody in this room has got a home. One person put their hand up who hasn't got a home. Nobody. Whoopee. So here we are, arguing the toss about where we're going to build. Brooklands Farm's going to come up. Bodkin Farm's going to come up. Blean's going to come up. I gave you a site for 120 to 140 rentable, permanent social houses in Whitstable. You idiots have come up with a 2040 plan now that makes it a green site so I can have horses shitting on it. What? Over people living in a house? That's what you've come up with. So you chose to, I got arrested, preventing me coming to that meeting. Do you remember it? 8th of April last year, 2024, because I was going to tell you how stupid you people are. Now, what does that leave me with now? I've got to put another bleeding application in. I've got to come here and guess where we are? Presumption. Back round again to where we were last year. And all you've done is sodded me around for another year. You approved this site, my site, with 2 SLA assessments. You said it passed it. You then approved it. You spent millions of pounds promoting it with the W6 site. It's all opposite Whitstable
Mr.
Heights,
Little,
if nobody's
Mr.
aware, of
Little.
Duncan Down.
Mr. Little,
And
will you
then
please
they then
discuss the
said,
current
we're not going to,
application?
I'm talking. And then they said
Please.
they're not going to approve it anymore. I mean, how idiotic are you lot? You've got planning officers that develop a
Mr.
plan.
Little, will you please
And you
stick to
lot
the
come
current
along here and then say,
application?
we might agree, we might not agree, and none of you know diddly dot about planning or anything.
And
any
your
one of
time
you
is
have
up,
built a house.
Mr. Little. Thank
You keep interrupting. 3 minutes is what we're supposed to get, and every minute you interrupted. You're not allowed to do that. That's a breach of the conditions of the rules that apply for me coming here and having my say. What are you going to do, arrest me?
Mr.
Is that what's going to happen? I went to a council meeting with Smith and Cordell, got arrested because I speak the truth. You don't like the truth.
Mr. Little, thank you.
Jesus. Muppet. All of it. This lot was sacked.
Mr. Little, the next speaker is about to be called. Could you please give them the same consideration? Thank you.
Please, could Richard Andrews, an objector, come forward to speak? Thank you. We don't mind. Let's just clarify. We've got Melanie Moore from the Parish Council, is that right? And she's speaking next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here to speak for the Parish Council and as a representative of the residents of Littlebourne, who I'd like to remind you polled 96% against this development. At this planning committee in May, the developers were requested to provide more details on the sustainability of the development, particularly in areas such as the travel plan and the additional demands on the already strained infrastructure, such as the school, doctor's surgery, and very importantly, the sewage system. Please may I remind you that this development will increase Littlebourne's housing stock by 46%. In their response to your request, the developers have failed to mention an increase of 46% capacity to any of these infrastructure issues. Scaringly, the new proposal highlights again that Southern Water will continue to tanker sewage from the village, and when the developer applies to Southern Water for connection, only then will they decide what to do with the sewage from the site. Again, I'd like to remind you that in times of high rainfall, as already mentioned, sewage is backing up into people's toilets at the bottom of the village now. Imagine what it'd be like experiencing with 46% more waste in the system. The travel plan also appears to be written by someone who does not commute from Littlebourne, as I do every morning. My morning bus is full of school children, and often the elderly, them and I, have to stand the whole journey. This has been happening for at least 10 years. Stagecoach have actually reduced the number of buses, not added additional buses. So forgive me if my faith in market conditions encouraging Stagecoach to provide extra buses is little to none. Back in May, the committee realised that anyone living in the development and working would need to be commuting out of the village with no practical choice other than by car. And Canterbury City Council was keen to dissuade car use in Canterbury, but this development is potentially putting 600 cars on an already congested and narrow Bigsbourne Road or heading into Canterbury. I urge you to realise that the development is simply unsustainable due to its size. The tilted balance you talk of is skewed by your shortfall in supply of housing. Surely your responsibility is also to the residents of this area to provide housing that will not have such devastating impact on the current residents. What this development will produce is a handful of, let's be honest, smaller properties that are out of budget for any local people and a lot of 4 to 5 bedroomed properties. On the other side of the scale still sits at a 46% increase of strain of local infrastructure and the impact on Littlebourne residents, and that is a response from the developers, still does not explain how this is going to be mitigated. Money to the local education authority and to Canterbury medical practice is not guaranteeing any alleviation of the strain on Littlebourne. And as I previously mentioned, Southern Water has stated they have no plans to do anything about the already failing sewage system until the development applies for connection. On the basis of this application, I must urge you to reject it today.
Thank you. Please could Richard Andrews now come forward? Thank you.
Good evening, councillors, and thank you for allowing me to come and speak today. I'm a professional ecological consultant with over 30 years of experience, including nearly 6 years as Kent's biodiversity specialist at the Environment Agency. I've also published procedural guidance for the water industry. This background gives me good insight into how the consultation system operates in relation to water and environmental management. The reality is that consultees like the Environment Agency have limited resources and must rely mainly on information provided by developers. They can't and don't carry out their own full and independent assessments, so their responses, though very important, are shaped by the applicant's evidence. In this case, we're very fortunate to have alternative scrutiny from local residents with professional expertise who spent months gathering independent evidence directly from Southern Water and elsewhere. Tim Bostock will be speaking to that in a moment. For my part, I'd like you to consider Southern Water's most recent response, requested by this council after the May deferral. In their 16th of June email, they refer to the right to connect, which prevents them from refusing connections and also requiring that their service does not deteriorate as a result. knowing full well that this standard hasn't been met before and is unlikely to be met in the foreseeable future, they carefully qualify this by going on to say, and I quote, "Where there is a lack of capacity in the foul network, Southern Water would ask for a condition to phase occupation with network reinforcement, or provide alternative drainage methods if the infrastructure is not in place." End of quote. In short, there is no plan or prospect for Southern Water of delivering these upgrades to support short-term housing growth, and they are careful to include a clear get-out for when they fail to deliver. Worse still, when then asked about ongoing sewer failures, their county network manager replied on the 24th of June, and I quote, "I am not aware of any operational issues. If you have any specifics, we could look into them." Again, I respectfully refer you to Tim Bostock's evidence in a moment for real insight and understanding. Chalk rivers are globally rare. Only around 200 exist in the world, and 85% are in England. That makes us the world's primary custodians of these fragile ecosystems. David Attenborough has described them as England's rainforests, rich, complex, and fragile. And Chris Packham calls them priceless wildlife corridors. Under the NERC Act, chalk rivers are listed as habitats of principal importance. This means that you have a legal duty to fully consider the river's ecology when making decisions. Our Chalk River, the Little Stour, is also a designated local wildlife site along parts of the village and downstream. I therefore urge you, please don't pass this responsibility to a failing water company. Please be the responsible stewards that this habitat and community deserves and refuse this unsustainable application. Thank you.
And our next speaker is Henry Fitch. Thank you. Yeah. Henry Fitch. We've done this once. Can we just go now with the list?
Yeah, you can.
Sorry.
That's the order we've got.
Who are you?
I'm Henry Fitz.
Sorry?
I'm the scheduled speaker.
Okay, thank you. I'm getting very confused now. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Henry Fitch. I'm a local resident and a solicitor with experience of practicing planning law. Councillors, none of the information received since the last meeting has assuaged concerns that this proposal is unsustainable. The only benefit is the prospect of housing starting to come forward in several years' time. It is not likely to come forward any sooner due to the need for further planning approvals and to works to upgrade the sewerage network. As a consequence, even if approved, this proposal would not contribute meaningfully towards the government's aim of building 1.5 million homes before the next election, and it would not mean that the council escapes the tilted balance, the presumption in favour of development, when considering future planning applications. The tilted balance seeks to bring forward development that is ready to go. This proposal is anything but that. No weight should be given to the prospect of an expansion of Littlebourne Primary School, as KCC have been clear in their response that no study into the feasibility of this has been undertaken. Indeed, the risk remains that the village primary school will become oversubscribed. The harms of this proposal are numerous. It would permanently damage the character and appearance of Littlebourne. This is not a proposal for a sensitive and proportionate expansion of the village. It is one that would result in an increase in population of around 50%, out of all proportion to the scale of house building need. Council officers acknowledged the great harm that developing this site would do to Littlebourne's character and appearance in its refusal of the previous application for just 1/3 of the number of houses now proposed. The damage to the character and appearance of Littlebourne are enough alone to refuse this application. There is inadequate infrastructure in Littlebourne to sustain this proposal. Weight can and should be given to the impact of loading more vehicles onto already overburdened, unsafe roads. The fact that KCC has not objected in no way stops you giving weight to this as one reason for refusal. The proposed link road, of which there remain no details, would in no way be a bypass. Southern Water have accepted that there is insufficient sewerage capacity and that they do not know if and when they will be able to provide such capacity. Their limited plans to address groundwater infiltration won't solve existing problems, let alone cope with new demand. National and local planning policy are clear that the reality of sewerage capacity must be considered when determining planning applications. The national media has recently reported that in Mays Morton, a village in Buckinghamshire, a similar 50% increase in housing was approved with a condition requiring sewerage upgrades, only for the condition to then be discharged before the works were completed. The lesson is clear. Conditioning sewerage upgrades means risking losing control. The government itself said in response to the Mays Morton situation, councils must consider sewerage capacity as part of their house building plans. This development is wrong in principle. It is simply too much for Littlebourne. It is not sustainable. It is not deliverable for several years. Its harms would demonstrably and significantly outweigh its benefit, and we respectfully urge you to reject it.
Tim Bostock. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and councillors. I recently highlighted the chronic failure of the wastewater system serving Littlebourne. During wet winter, rising groundwater overwhelms this ageing system, risking domestic sewer flooding and pollution. Residents, many of whom are here today, endure long-term emergency restrictions on using toilets, bathrooms and laundry facilities. HGV tankers and pipes block roads and create nuisance, and occasionally raw sewage is pumped directly into the Little Stour. The environmental penalties are high. I now want to highlight the fact that resolving this litany of problems within the next 10 years is not just unlikely, it's virtually impossible. Southern Water's business plan confirms that 80% of essential repairs to our network are deferred to at least the next decade. Costly and disruptive emergency measures will continue. Against this backdrop, we have a proposal to add over 50% more housing in Littlebourne. Southern Water's records show that additional wastewater from the 300 new houses will further overwhelm an already defective network. Southern Water state that this could increase risk of foul flooding from the sewer network, increase the likelihood of surface flooding, heighten the need for tankering, and elevate the risk of overpumping into the chalk stream. With regional rainfall set to rise by about 40% due to climate change, these problems will only worsen. We've heard many relevant concerns expressed about traffic, schools, transport, the village's character and appearance, and so on. While sewage isn't something we like to think much about, we tend to flush and forget. When it comes back to bite you, perhaps it's time to take a closer look. Southern Water's response to the Council's concerns provide no assurance that essential network upgrades will happen, regardless of whether the development proceeds. Alarmingly, their reply, as mentioned by Richard, reveals a striking lack of awareness of existing local issues. Although they are legally obliged to connect new housing, they're also required to maintain service levels for existing customers. Yet, by their own data, this is unachievable without comprehensive remediation. The adverse impacts of approving any development without essential infrastructure upgrades is clear. Environmental damage to a protected chalk stream, unacceptable nuisance to residents, public health risks, and ineffective delivery of essential public goods. This would contradict the principles of sustainable development as set out in national policy. Further, while the Council considers the tilted balance in favour of sustainable development to apply due to land supply shortfall, I respectfully suggest that this is unwarranted, primarily because A, the adverse impacts clearly outweigh the benefits, and B, there is no credible time-bound delivery plan to secure the upgrades that are needed for the new housing. Clearly, therefore, this proposal is fundamentally inconsistent with national and local policy. Approving it as proposed means locking in long-term harm to residents and the environment. Councils must consider sewage capacity as part of their house building plans. I therefore urge you to robustly refuse this application. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Lee Castle, Ward Councillor, would like to speak next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors. This feels a bit novel sitting here, so apologies. What happens tonight may define the fate of Littlebourne for generations. We're on the cusp of a decision that could either preserve or unravel the very fabric of our village. Across the country, we've seen a broken planning system forces councillors into difficult, often poor decisions made for the wrong reasons. Please don't let that happen here. While the need for social and affordable housing is undeniable, this proposal does not deliver it meaningfully. The development comprises primarily of 3 and 4 bedroom homes as per the housing mix, probably priced far beyond what most first-time buyers can afford. In reality, this is not the type of housing our community urgently needs. Only 100 units are designated as social housing, a negligible number in a district where thousands remain on the housing register. This is not a serious attempt to address the housing crisis. It's a market-led overdevelopment dressed as a solution. The argument that the presumption in favour of development outweighs harm in this case is unsupportable. Our infrastructure is already strained, roads are insufficient, public transport is unreliable and local amenities are scarce. The GP surgery frequently redirects patients to inaccessible locations due to staff shortages with poor connectivity. The primary school is oversubscribed and the promised £2 million will never cover the cost of doubling its size. Proposed road improvements consist only of removing residents' parking bays. For a crossing, there is zero investment in the broader highway safety. The outline application submitted offers minimal detail. 300 homes near an A road with no train station, no school places guaranteed, and limited local employment is not sustainable. It's a car-dependent sprawl in a rural village without proper walking or cycling infrastructure. Southern Water has admitted it cannot meet existing residents' needs. No major upgrades are planned for the already failing system, only minor tweaks to accommodate more homes. Yet they cannot adequately serve current residents. It seems more effort has gone into minimising developer costs than building a livable community. Once profits are secured, residents will be left with overstretched services and a diminished quality of life. The modest gain in social housing will not compensate for the lasting harm done to those already living in Littlebourne, Beaksbourne and the surrounding areas. Recent planning inspector decisions show a clear trend. Poorly conceived, vague proposals are being rejected. This is such a case. Far more detailed and well-prepared developments have been turned down, some in this very room. Approving this plan would set a dangerously low bar. Please do not join the long list of councillors making decisions under threat of legal costs or false urgency. Your role is to assess policy compliance and public interest, not to yield to pressure. The National Planning Policy Framework only supports sustainable development when benefits clearly outweigh the harm. Here the harm is evident, and the benefits are not. Ask yourselves, would you accept this in your own ward? Let me be clear, if this application were approved, it will not be accepted passively. Residents are united, determined and resolute. This will not be the end of their opposition. Please vote to reject this application tonight. Thank you for your time.
Need to move on to the next speaker. Thank you, goodness. The next speaker is James Whitehead, the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, members. Since the deferral at May Committee, the applicant has worked proactively with the case officer to address the concerns raised by members. We have agreed a new condition requiring the proposed development to deliver biodiversity net gain of 20%, fully aligning with the emerging local plan. This step ensures our development not only protects but significantly enhances the local environment. We have also strengthened the proposed condition in relation to the energy strategy to reflect a commitment to deliver net zero homes in line with the Future Homes Standard. This means our homes will be zero carbon ready, using low carbon heating systems and built to high standards of insulation and airtightness. We also looked at an alternative access option via a roundabout off the hill, but due to technical constraints and the need for third-party land, this was not feasible. However, as access is a reserved matter, members will have full oversight at the final design stage. Members and local residents also raised concerns regarding the potential impact of the development on existing flooding in the village and the chalk stream. I'd like to reiterate that the surface water runoff from the site is currently uncontrolled. Our proposals were introduced on-site attenuation, allowing surface water to be captured, cleaned and released gradually. This will significantly reduce flood risk, delivering a benefit to the village and helping protect the nearby chalk stream. Southern Water have also confirmed they have no plans to upgrade the local foul infrastructure without this development. This is therefore another potential benefit for existing residents of Littlebourne. Overall, it is important to reiterate that this council has chosen to allocate the application site for 300 dwellings in the emerging local plan. The applicant is keen to move the site forward quickly so that it can contribute to Canterbury's identified need for market and affordable housing. The officer's report highlights a clear and urgent need for affordable housing. 464 homes are needed each year, yet on average only 69 are being delivered. Meanwhile, the number of households on the temporary accommodation list continues to rise. This scheme will deliver 90 affordable homes, including 63 for affordable or social rent, making a meaningful contribution to meeting that need and helping council fulfil its responsibility to provide secure, sustainable homes for local people. There remain no objections from statutory consultees, and the applicant has worked to address the concerns raised at the previous committee. I hope members will agree that the additional benefits further support the officer's recommendation for approval, and I therefore respectfully invite you to follow that recommendation and grant outline planning permission. Thank you.
We've got in front of us, I'm sorry, thank you, speakers. We've got in front of us an officer's recommendation that authorisation be given to the head of planning to grant planning permission subject to a section 106 legal agreement to secure the obligations set out in the report and the imposition of safeguarding conditions as recommended in the report. I'm mindful that we've had a huge amount of input from individuals on a number of issues, some of which I hope you realise we can't take into account today. That's quite important that we distinguish between those that we can focus on and those that we can't. For example, the current sewage problems will not be solved by this one way or the other. You know, they are separate issues, they are separate matters. I do see that we have a lot of concerns. I do know that we did last time. I will propose the officer's recommendation and see if I do have a seconder, but I want to explain that I'm doing this in order very clearly that the officer report can be debated and that I have an open mind on the application, and I'll reach my opinion on the acceptability or otherwise of the planning application once the debate has concluded. So I want to propose the officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
I will second so that the debate can take place.
Thank you. That's Naomi Smith, sorry. Shouldn't use people's first names, I realise that, sorry. Thank you very much. So the proposal is on the table. I do want us to try and clarify, we may need to do that by a bit of discussion, about what issues that we have heard about tonight that don't form part of this actual application. But let's start the discussion with having other people's contributions before I start summing up or in any way summarising. Who would like to start? Councillor Forrester, Councillor Old, Councillor Smith and Councillor Clare. I'm going to say Clare again. Turnbull. Thank you. Sorry. I must get people's surnames straight. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to all the objectors who've spoken today, and thank you to all the residents for coming out in force tonight. I wanted to particularly say thank you to Miss Moore from the Parish Council for your comments about transport, because my question is that despite the promises by Stagecoach, I'm concerned whether the bus service is really sufficient and is really a sustainable travel option in the report. So the report says that the frequency is every 30 minutes, but this is not consistent And at peak times, on weekday mornings, it looks like 4 of those services are school buses. And all the residents, wherever you live around Canterbury, know what that means. Most people can't get on. It's less frequent in the evenings and only hourly on Sundays and bank holidays. So this combination, with the lack of adequate walking provision from the train station, which I appreciate is a KCC issue, but really, does that not mean that residents will have to continue to rely on their cars and this isn't a sufficient alternative? Thank you.
I think it might be best when there is a reply from the planning perspective that we take those comments as we go along. So Simon would like to comment on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, the discussion I had with Stagecoach is that there is sufficient capacity on the buses. That's what they're telling me, and it's based on, they have real-time information about the capacity on the buses. It's also available...
Sorry, is that at peak times or is that over the whole day? I don't know if you get that clarification.
Well, I mean, they're saying in its entirety, they're not saying they need to put any other services. That's what they're telling me. And what they have is real-time information about the capacity on buses, and there is an app apparently that is available to the public to see, whether a bus is full, has whatever capacity there is on that bus. So the information that they have is quite detailed, and the information available to the public is quite detailed around buses. So it is a relatively well-served village, half-an-hour bus service. So yeah, that's what Stagecoach are telling me. They're operating the buses, and they have obviously more information than I do.
Councillor Auld.
Thank you, Chair. At our last consideration of this matter, 6 weeks or so ago, councillors failed to support this application. And the report before us tries to address some of the concerns I and other councillors had. But for me, I don't see any resolution of those important concerns. The issues about alternative access are not being addressed. They've simply been pulled and pushed into reserved matters so that we can't have that discussion about them today. The issue about the infrastructure for sewage is not something that we could discuss because Southern Water say we won't consider that until there's a proposal going ahead. But we do know that it's inadequate at the moment and there are no plans to address that. There seems to be a lot of discussion and discrepancy about issues of the chalk stream and the value of the agricultural land that is being used, and that hasn't been resolved sufficiently to my mind. So the only significant change between this application and the application that this council considered as recently as 2021 is that the council is now in presumption. And this proposal, it seems to me, seems to exploit the council's vulnerability in the fact that we are now in presumption by coming forward with a proposal that's 3 times the size of the application that was refused with good reason in 2021. Thank you, Mr. Little. So I don't see there's been any reasons to change the decision that was made in 2021. The issues are still outstanding to my mind, but it does leave me with a dilemma. It leaves me a dilemma that should I go with my gut and reject the application because I don't see that the issues have been sufficiently addressed and risk exposing the council to the risk of being overturned at a planning appeal and the consequences of all of that? Or do I just consider that we ought to reject it, as is my gut feeling? So I will consider that over the next part of the discussion. Thank you.
I want to clarify a few points. I think it's incredibly different from the earlier application, and it is detailed in the report why that is. A number of reasons. The level of detail of the actual plan, lots of that. But also primarily as well, that it's no longer in the Stodmarsh catchment area, which was a big issue then, but that it's been clarified that it's not now. It's just the way that the water runs, it's not. So I just want to clarify that. And on the sewage, I wasn't, if I did appear to say don't discuss it, that's not my point. My point was that the current problems with sewage can't be resolved by this application, as I think has been implied. And I just want to be clear about that. I think you can comment on them, but what we've got to focus on is the sewage issues for this application, not the current problems within the village. I just want to be clear, not about not mentioning them, but talk about them contextually.
If I could come back on that.
Yes,
How can we
absolutely.
comment on issues related to the sewage? We don't have any details about what's going to happen to that. We're being told that that's not going to be considered until after this proposal is decided.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just come back on that particular point. I mean, throughout the country, any planning permissions won't have details of sewage because it's not a matter for the planning authority to design upgrades to sewage systems. And the way the law works is that if an outline permission is granted, then the applicant will apply to the water company in order to request connection to a system, and that connection will only be given if the appropriate and necessary upgrades are provided. So it is a matter that we will never get involved in detail. What we are proposing here, though, is a condition that kind of oversees that process in terms of the housing delivery on the site. So where the condition would mean the developer would have to come to us to basically tell us what the position is with regard to the upgrades to the sewers in order to confirm that they can deliver the development in the phases that they want to. So that's effectively, we've got a degree of control over the housing development, but we haven't got any control over the sewage upgrades, absolutely nothing whatsoever, but we can control the housing development, and that's the important point. So, and just, Chair, do you want me to pick up on a couple of other bits as well?
Okay.
Yeah, just a couple of other things. I mean, in terms of access, I think because of the concerns last time, and councillors, I think, had some ideas on, what might be a better access point. The developer has gone away and looked at whether they can put an access at the top of the hill, and there are constraints there. There are residential driveways and other things, and land, they don't own the land, or the developer doesn't have control over that land or won't. But the access that was proposed last time round was agreed by Kent County Council as the optimum position for an access. And of course, it's lower down into the village, so it means that people, particularly walking, we form a natural desire line into the centre of the village and helps that integration. So, it was considered to be optimum technically and in terms of sustainability. In terms of the agricultural land, the applicant has carried out a survey with, a qualified person has carried out that survey because the national maps were in the 80s. They're not reliable on a site-by-site basis, and that survey, the details of that survey are on the website, and we've summarised it in the report. And it shows that the land isn't grade 1, it's less than grade 1, and I think 38% is grade 3A. Grade 3A is best and most versatile land. So grade 1 to grade 3A is described as best and most versatile agricultural land. Anything below that is not. So that's the distinction, and that's what the study found on this particular site. So those issues have been covered in the report, in terms of those points. But the previous permission, as the chair said, it was impacted by the need to achieve nutrient neutrality. At the time, the advice from Natural England was that this site needs to achieve nutrient neutrality to ensure that it doesn't impact on Stodmarsh Nature Reserve. And that advice has changed between the previous application and this application, so there's no longer a requirement to demonstrate nutrient neutrality. Also, yeah, as you say, the big one, the big change is the fact that we no longer can demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing. We're at about 4.6, I think was the last figure. And also, we've only delivered 70% of our housing targets. So we're well below the requirement. And therefore, we're in presumption in favour of development. The tilted balance applies. The tilted balance is in favour of housing development, subject to considerations of sustainability. So that's where we are, as you know, that's exactly where we are, and those are the considerations that the committee has. Chair, do you want me to just pick? And there was just one other point regarding the risks of refusing the application. If we refuse the application, we had a good reason to refuse an application. If we don't have good reason, then an inspector might consider that we've been unreasonable, and then costs would follow that. So there's no kind of threat of costs, but if we're not being reasonable, then the inspector will impose a cost order on us, and it could be, you know, quite high, naturally. So yeah, we never put the committee under threat of cost, but we say you have to be reasonable, and consequently, you will then avoid. You will then avoid
Please,
the risk.
Other people in the
cost.
room cannot comment at this stage in the proceedings. I'm sorry. You please have to be quiet. It's really important that the committee is deliberating and can contemplate what is being said. I would like to make 2 comments. One is that it is important that the presumption is in favour of sustainable development, and the other is that it isn't satisfactory just to refuse this or just to say no to this proposal. We have to actually find reasons. I mean, I'm really just supplementing what Simon has already said. Reasons. So please, will you please frame, if you want to do that, your responses in that way. We need to be clear about the kinds of issues, planning issues, many of which are in this report, that you wish to pick up on to demonstrate your feeling as to why this shouldn't, as it were, be a presumption in favour of the development because it's not sustainable. That was the query last time. Those are the answers that Simon's given you about sustainability issues that we raised last time. You've got the answers, but please think about it like that, because we need a decision, not just a refusal to accept a proposal. We've been there before, and I'm just reminding everybody. So the next speaker was Naomi Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions, and we have talked a lot about where the water goes once you've used it. We haven't talked about whether they get the water in the first place. I happen to be the Sea Salter Ward councillor, and we had 6 days of no water because South East Water couldn't supply the current demand. Now, current demand is a basic right, actually, but South East Water have failed about 3,500 residents. Some for 3 days, but another 1,300 homes for 6 days. So can we put a condition in that South East Water have to prove that they can supply the demand, that they can deal with the demand for extra water on this development? Then the thing about, I'm not convinced on the transport plan at all. I feel that the bus service isn't robust enough to persuade people to use buses rather than cars. And then I am concerned about this 46% increase of housing on Littlebourne. It seems that will make such a huge impact that it will be unsustainable, is how I see that. I also would like an answer about the affordable and social housing, because what the mix is on that. Because I heard a couple of different figures bandied around, and I got 100 homes, and then I got 68 homes. And out of that, and I'd like to know how many are going to be affordable, and how many are going to be actually for social rent, because it's social rent that drives our getting people out of temporary housing, etc., from our housing list.
I think it might be good. I was suggesting Simon came in on every point, but I'm just thinking that if we are repeating points, it might be better to take a few more speakers because we have quite a list now of people wanting to talk, and then we'll try and group them under headings. So then we will come back to those points. I've written them down, Simon's written them down, so we're not going to forget them. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you've written them down, good. So the next person I've got is Claire, Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to come back to this point about sustainable development as well, because I'd like to sort of be clear about what the definition of sustainable is. I know it's not a sort of sustainable in the sort of the other. I know what it means in terms of it can be delivered pretty much, but we've talked about. I think we've had Councillor Castle pointed out the benefits outweighing the harms, and there's nothing in this which convinces me that the benefits of building it outweigh the harms that have been presented to us, and also the number of conditions that have been put in there in order to make this a sustainable site just seem to make it a nonsense, really, and particularly as this is not going to be delivered anytime soon, as one of the speakers mentioned. Because a lot of the, for example, the Southern Water work will not happen unless this comes forward. So, and they've got no plans to upgrade their system. So there's nothing saying that this is actually going to address our housing situation. It is disproportionate. It's disproportionate for the size of the village. I'm looking at paragraph 198 of the planning framework. She said, decision should also ensure that new development is appropriate for its location, taking into account the likely effects, including cumulative effects of pollution on health, living conditions and natural environment, as well as the potential sensitivity of the site or the wider area to impacts that could arise from the development. Now, that's talking about sort of probably land contamination sort of pollution, but it's there and it's talking about pollution. It doesn't specify what pollution is. There are grounds, I think there are grounds for saying this is not a sustainable site. This is not a sustainable proposal. Thanks.
Claire, could you just remind me the section that you quoted there about?
It was 198.
Of the?
NPPF.
NPPF, thank you. The next person is Councillor Mackenzie, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I would like to ask for a little bit more clarity on the sewage element of this, because it is quite concerning that we don't know what will happen with it. And, you know, I've heard what Simon has said, that if this is granted, then the applicants will apply to connect to the sewage system, and there'll be a modelling system, and there will be necessary upgrades if determined necessary. But what happens then if they don't get allowed to connect to the sewage system and all these houses are built with the sewage nowhere to go, is what I'm concerned about. So could we not put a condition on this that the sewage system has to be properly connected before so many houses are occupied, as we do with other infrastructure? For instance, we've had other, with the development in my ward, Starry, there was that condition that the link road had to be up before so many houses were occupied. Can we not do something similar here? And yeah, actually, that's my question. Thank you.
Dan, did you put your hand up earlier? I think you're next then. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Slightly puzzled about the lack of comment in this report from Southern Water and from South East Water, actually, but from Southern Water in particular, given the issues of sewage. Because I would have thought we'd have had an updated and more comprehensive report within this, and I don't see one. So I see comments on previous comments on it, but and things that they've said apparently, but no actual report from them. So I find that somewhat lacking. The couple of other things, the agricultural land, being an old boy who's driven through Littlebourne many times down the years, I remember that land being fruit trees. The agricultural land status, I think in the previous time it was brought here 6 weeks or so ago, mentioned the fruit trees being the grade 1 farmland. Obviously, there's a significant difference between its current use as a cereal crop and fruit trees, stony ground and things makes a difference for that. So I suspect digging down one level further in the detail might be appropriate in that to check the status of the farmland. Also, I think it's been very clear here that the connection to the railway station over at Bigsbourne is not a runner, which I think is something that was originally one of the factors that was put forward as a benefit to this. So in effect, from that point, it seems to have lost a benefit unless some further effort is to be made to bring that to bear. On the other side of the coin, the improvement in the biodiversity is welcome, and obviously the status of the house is also welcome. But I think on balance, this is, as others have said, not looking as if it's leaning towards an improvement over the previous position. So I don't think my view will change on that at the moment, although I'm still happy to listen to others on their views. Thank you.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions and a couple of queries. When it comes to the sewage connection, we can't put in a condition that has to be put in, the infrastructure has to be put in before any footings go in. Also, I'm a bit confused because are you saying to this committee that if we don't grant this application, the sewage system won't be upgraded? Because technically, just if that's correct, that's almost putting a gun to our heads to grant it for the residents that are already there. That's kind of how I got you to. That's how I understood how you explained it last time, or just at the committee.
I was actually seeking to almost say the opposite of that. I don't think we can look to this development to sort out the problem that's already there. They are two separate things. We've got a note from Southern Water saying that they don't plan to do upgrades to the current situation there. They're talking about system-wide improvements to sewage pipes that will make them self-contained and not be affected by the flooding. They're talking about that, but not specifically in Littlebourne. They haven't actually said that they're going to do that. So, I mean, that was something that I particularly felt we should be asking them. And the answer we've got back is that they're not. However, what I've understood is that we've got to keep that point separate from the sewage system of this, and what we've got here is something that we would be able to condition. We can probably talk about what conditions. We would be able to condition it. Whether we're happy with that or not, that's obviously what the committee's got to think about. But no, I was trying to separate the two, not include them. Not taking a gun to your head saying this will improve the other conditions, because I don't think it will. I think the problem in Littlebourne is the problem in Littlebourne. It has to be dealt with separately. That already exists. That's my understanding. So all I was trying to do is separate them, not say they're not conditional. So I don't think even if you could have 300 houses, they could be adequately provided with sewage system, and it still wouldn't stop the tankering of what's already going on in Littlebourne. That's as I see it. So separate them, not put them together. So I think it's the opposite of what you understood me to say. So I hope now I'm making myself clear. Thank you.
Okay, so the residents in that area should be forcing Southern Water to actually upgrade it anyway. So that's down to the local councillors or whoever to sort that out. When it comes to the expansion of the school, are we talking about an expansion where you have more children in the school, which means you've got bigger classrooms, or are you talking about an expansion, i.e. we're going to build a new annex to the school? Because if you're doubling the population, in theory, I know it doesn't quite work like this, you're doubling the children's population. So technically the school has to double in size because you know, in simple maths, that's what you're going to end up doing. And the next question is, if we weren't in presumption, would this have actually got refused at officer stage? So it wouldn't even be here. Thank you.
We've got quite a lot of questions now. So we have got 3 more people to speak, but I think we should take a stop now and get some of these questions answered. And then I've got Councillor Buckman, Councillor Jones and Councillor Naomi Smith again afterwards, and now Councillor Stockley. But I think that before we have 3 more people and 3 more sets of questions, we should go through what we've got and get ourselves up to date. Thank you. Simon.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, lots of questions. Definition of sustainable development is that there are 3 elements to it: economic, social, and environmental factors. So, you know, all development will have an impact, and it's a question of balancing the economic, social, and environmental factors in each case. And obviously, our report, the officer report, says that that balance has been achieved here, particularly given that there's a need for housing in the district. We're not delivering enough housing. People are, you know, struggling as a result of that. There are people who are homeless, people who aren't living in good housing conditions. So we do need more housing. The government's very, very clear about this. And it tells us if we're not delivering, then we have to, the presumption applies that we should be granting planning permissions. That's a national policy. In terms of, sorry, I'm going through the questions in some logical order. A lot of the questions are around, sorry, if I pick up the bus one first, is that I think there was a concern that well, I'm not quite sure what the concern was, but I think it was around whether people would be persuaded to travel by bus as opposed to by car. I mean, this is an issue everywhere, isn't it? People may favour a car, you know, over a bus. And I think the point here is that there is a frequent bus service from the village. There's also a commitment by the developer to put in place the travel plan before anybody occupies the site. That will include giving information, real-time information about bus services and capacity on the buses and everything. There's also a 6-car club, which would benefit this development and the existing village. So there's quite a number of things that they're putting in place to encourage people to you know, look at alternative means. I mean, obviously the Littlebourne has a shop, it has some local facilities as well, so there are reasons why people might not need to travel so frequently. And then a lot of people do their shopping online now, so, you know, people get deliveries of food, so the nature of the environment's changing. So the other questions were around the chalk stream, I think. I mean, what the applicant can do, there's an opportunity here to manage the flow of water into the chalk stream, because at the moment it's just running off the field and it's not managed in any way. So there's an opportunity here with you know, holding tanks, suds and so on, to design a system that will reduce the amount of flow directly from the field, or manage that flow. So it will have a potential beneficial impact on the chalk stream. The Southern Water issue, I mean, I know it's a difficult one for the committee, because under the, you know, it's governed by the Water Act. It's a bit of legislation that we can't you know, cross over with. It, you know, we can only grant a planning permission, and then it's up to the water company to you know, design upgrades that are necessary in order to accommodate this development. And it will always happen after a planning permission is granted. This is the system that we are faced with. But what we have put in the report is condition 15, which, arguably it goes beyond what we would normally look to do, and it gives us a stake in that sewage improvement process. And what it says is no development at all can begin in any phase of the development. So all the way through the development, nothing can happen until the proposed means of foul and sewage water disposal for that phase have been submitted to us and approved in writing by us, and that whatever we approve, the development should be carried out in accordance with that. And of course, we control the development, we don't control the upgrades to the sewage system. So it effectively puts a block on development happening until we're satisfied that the upgrades are in place. So I think it gives us all we can ever hope for in terms of a stake in that process. And it's not perfect, and we don't have control over the sewage with the water companies. We don't have that as a matter of law. But the best we can do, I think, is to oversee that process and put blocks on development until we're satisfied that those upgrades or whatever is required is put in place. So I think that's where we are with that.
Proportionate size.
All right. Yeah, I mean, well, the development is what it is. It's 300 houses. It's a sizable expansion to Littlebourne. In the draft local plan, we have identified it as a potential expansion. That plan is in an early stage at the moment, so we're not relying on that. But yes, it's a sizable extension to the village, and you have to look very carefully at how it will integrate and whether it is an acceptable development. But of course, in the reports, with the conditions and the legal agreements and so on, we think that we can manage that development so that it will integrate sufficiently. And particularly concerns about education. At the moment, as I understand it, the school is a 0.5 form entry school, and the contribution of 2.2 million from the developer would take that to a 1 form entry school, so it will double the school capacity. So it'll probably go more than the development requires, just marginally, but it will accommodate the number of children that the development will have. But again, I'd just come back to this point that we are in a presumption in favour of development. There is undoubtedly a need for housing. There's also a need for social housing, for affordable housing, and this development would deliver 30% affordable housing, and that will be split. Roughly 70% would be affordable rent, which is about 80% of market value, and 30% would be another form of, so probably shared ownership is the most common type of housing. The 30%, sorry, the affordable rent, people can get housing benefit to cover that if they need that, but it reduces down their overall costs of housing. So it is a positive for the district. There's no doubt about that. It's a good thing for the district. So the question, for you is more about sustainability factors as opposed to the housing, because the tilted balance is very much in favour of this development for housing, and in fact, housing generally within the district is desperately needed, because there are people at the sharp end who are, there are consequences for not delivering housing, and the government's very clear about that. And all governments, successive governments have been very clear that we need to deliver the housing that people need.
Thank you. And there's one more, which was, would we have this in front of us if we weren't in presumption?
Not necessarily. I think the point. It's difficult to say conclusively because this site is in the draft local plan. But if we weren't in presumption, we might not be putting this forward at this stage. Because if you think about it, the previous application was refused, and that was primarily because we weren't in presumption at that time. So I think if you take that logic through, yes, you probably wouldn't see this application in front of you in other circumstances.
Take our last 3 contributions. Oh, maybe it's 4 now. Councillor Buckman, you're next.
Yeah, thanks for that. I do have issues with the sustainability of this development. I think Councillor Forrester was correct when she spoke about the bus service, and I think statistics can be made to show anything really. And they were I think Stagecoach seemed quite keen not to say they had capacity at peak times. They sort of, had they said we were able to cope at peak times with the bus service, fair enough, but that was avoided. And then with the GP surgeries, again, like the NHS, ICB, and the increased pressure of all GP surgeries everywhere with more houses. Obviously, we do need more houses. There's no getting away from that. But the money might not stretch to the Littlebourne surgery. It might not get there. It might be spent elsewhere. It does say there is no guarantee that it would reach that, but just specifically for there. And then also, I noticed it must be a sort of car. The developer must be thinking it is a car-led development, because they said about the electric charging points for all houses and apartments. So they must consider that there will be a use generally for more cars, and it might not be the pollution if they're electric, but it's. Sorry. Where was I? Oh, yeah, sorry about that. Electric charging, yeah. So it does seem sort of like a car-led development, because it is having more electric charging points for everywhere. And it is, it might not have the pollution, but it will increase congestion on the roads that we already see around Canterbury on the Ring Road and coming in on the A25, whatever. It's going to cause more congestion and delays everywhere else. So that the delays would also increase pollution on the cars that aren't electric. It's hard. It's hard because development is needed, but it doesn't seem that sustainable. And thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the speakers this evening. And I don't really want to sound like an echo, but for me, it's a site which isn't sustainable regarding transport. I think it's not sustainable to expect a 48% increase in growth from the village of Littlebourne. Things, when they develop over years, villages tend to grow with a bit of development here and a bit of a development there, and things can obviously grow with that, and then they become sustainable. Totally understand the reason why we need housing. I know we're in presumption of grant, not in this area, but my brother benefited from share ownership. He wouldn't have been able to buy a house otherwise. But for where he had his home, which is not around here, was on a site which was sustainable, which did have good bus routes, which was built correctly and delivered for those people. But for me here, it's a complete worry where we separate the two things, take the sewage system. I'm not convinced that the sewage provider who takes it away, I mean, their answer to your flooding problems in Littlebourne at the moment is, I think you said earlier, is to seal the manholes. So if the water doesn't go down the manholes, it'll go in the houses or it'll run into the river. I mean, if that's a solution from a company who actually think, well, who thought of that as an idea? Let's block our own manholes up to save a solution. That's what, unless I've been told wrong, but I wrote down sealing the manholes covers, which is ridiculous. Obviously, having to have the sewage on the site, then go through the system, I'm not convinced that there's enough safeguard in place for me to be comfortable to say I'm quite reassured that that will happen. I think it will really happen when a pipe bursts and we'll put about a 4-foot section in and then we'll do another section. I'm not convinced of at all. Our infrastructure completely in this country, not just here, is not particularly good. And going on Councillor Naomi Smith's comment, and I agree totally with the Southern Water regarding the South East Water problem. At the moment, we have an issue where supply is a problem. Not that we haven't got water in the ground, we just can't get it to the taps because there's too many properties bolted onto the system. Until we can manage that infrastructure, which is basic water in your tap, basic sewage going out the other end, for me, it's not sustainable. They're just two of the most basic human things, and we're struggling and considering building a big estate where, in my opinion, I don't think that would happen. Now, going on the point about the water runoff, that's good to hear that there's things put in place, and currently the water just runs off a field. Well, that's running basically off a field probably with grass and nitrogen in it. When you build a 300 estate, you'll have rubber tyres, diesel, oil, petrol, and that'll run down and find its way into the chalk stream. The one thing that we don't want to end up in is poisoning the river. It's, at the moment, water will find its way down there, which is not obviously the best when it's running off a road, but when you add a building and an estate in there, unless there's some sort of cleaning system built into it, it'll end up into the chalk stream. As the gentleman said earlier, I think I might quote it wrong, 80% of the chalk streams in the world are here in England. I think that was the figure he said. So surely that protection alone, it doesn't convince me that there's going to be mitigation enough to allow for what I would call normal day-to-day living in an area which is urbanised by building houses on it, where the downstream effect from the normal runoff, from washing your car, the things you're going to do, is going to find its way into that river. That's not acceptable. It's not enough in place. There's not enough information. I'm not against housing. It sounds like I am, but this is not literally sustainable. It just isn't. And there's not enough reassurance for me to think that if I was going to lived in Littlebourne, knowing that these houses were coming online, reassurance from either the people who want to build the houses or the water company that would those two ever get together, two completely different interests, I'm not convinced that would work. And that, for me, I feel is one of the big driving factors. But if you want planning reasons, it's not, for me, sustainable regarding travel, buses every half an hour. I know what you said earlier, Simon. I'm not going to disagree with what you said in the sense of the information you've got, but I don't think that's sufficient. And what I found is once people find a way of living, so in other words, if there is not much of a good bus service, half an hour is probably not for most people, I guess. I don't use the bus that much, I'll be honest. I drive everywhere. And once you start doing that, you never change your habit, and you can throw all the buses that you like. And that's what Stagecoach have probably done over the last 10, 15 years, and that's why there's only one bus every half an hour. So you can hear my view. I'm not convinced that this is a sustainable site. Thank you, Chair.
Naomi Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come back on the point about South East Water and its provision of water and its capability of that, because I don't think I got an answer on that. It got a little bit mixed up with the Southern Water and the condition 15. So whether we could add, right, if that could be added as a condition. I can see benefits of this development. The school could be better resourced. There could be, actually, I do think the SUDs would work better with the runoff, because I think they're talking about doing cleaning on site of the water, so that would be better than what is now. However, I still can't see this being this big scale, and as Councillor Jones has said, putting 300 now, it should be a more gradual development of an area, so it gets expanded over a period of time. I just think this is it's an unsustainable shock, to a community. Thank you.
Councillor Stockley.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from my colleague's Councillor Jones' point about the runoff, I'm very concerned, not only with the runoff as we will see it in the future, i.e. cars, tyres, pollutants, chemicals that are used for lawns, whatever. We are fixated on the runoff being reduced from what is a natural field to a housing estate. They're both very different things. And reading page 13, where we see, with my glasses on, that there will be a design, the authority will approve a design for treating, including used measures such as filter strips, no idea, filter drains, not a clue, swales, I know what they are, permeable paving and infiltration basins. Well, that's all very well, but what are they filtering out? Are they going to be filtering out spilt diesel? Are they going to be filtering out contaminants that are over and above what you'd normally expect from a field? I'm not convinced it's sustainable. I'm very concerned about the short chalk stream. I'm to the extent that what studies have been done about the footings, the foundations, the huge quantity of concrete which is going to be poured onto this ground, which will then leach all sorts of chemicals into the ground, which will then work its way down the hill and into the stream. You know, we're following on from that. You've got sewage, which we may or may not be able to consider. But given at the moment that we're tankering off sewage, we're having spilled sewage on site now, how's that going to be treated? You know, this is a very sensitive habitat. You can't put another 300 homes and expect to have less sewage spills. I'm sorry, but I just can't support this. I do accept that there are benefits. I've looked, but I cannot see in the transport plan what provision there are for cycling and walking. You know, we've got a development which is or proposed development, which is very close to Canterbury. It appears to me to be an ideal place to cycle into Canterbury. It's mostly downhill on the way in and mostly uphill on the way back. Electric bikes, great. But, you know, KCC are all very well taking the money for road improvements, but what about the cyclists? You know, we can't expect people to get on buses that are full of school children at peak times because, as has been mentioned, you won't get on. So I disagree with the officers that this is a sustainable site. I don't think it is, and I will not be voting for it. Thank you.
Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you. I just had a couple of specific questions. I haven't been involved in this one before. I'm not usually on the planning committee. I'm looking at the draft local plan where this site is included. One of the criteria is that a provision of new high quality wastewater treatment works at an appropriate location within the site would be included. Now, I think that there was some talk. I've been looking through the papers, and I think there was some talk that there was going to be a wastewater treatment site initially, but then that's sort of gone out the window in the new reiteration of the application. I think that there was something along those lines, but I'd just like a bit of clarification on that because I'm not quite sure what that.
Yeah, I think this is, Claire, this is because when the previous application came in, it was believed that this affected the Stodmarsh site. Further views about where the water flows from this part of Littlebourne, it doesn't flow towards Stodmarsh, so it flows somewhere else, and that's why it's the catchment of Stodmarsh that was amended. Basically, it's nothing to do with this site. It's just it was amended. It wasn't quite accurate, and so that's what took it out of that. And that's what led to, at that time, a wastewater treatment solution, which is what we've had in many of the other developments which we've recently passed, such as Pope's Lane, etc. We've had wastewater treatment plants. So that's why we're now in this debate and discussion about the sewage, which we seem to have much less control over than I think any of us would like. I propose we take the vote on this. I sense the room. Councillor Stockley.
I'd just like to come back to the fact that I haven't had any answers on the filtration or any answers about the conditions, i.e. how do we prevent leaching from the hundreds of tonnes of concrete going into the chalk stream. You know, I know there are no answers, but at least I'd like it addressed. Thank you.
We need to take a formal vote, but we've actually noted that as a possible reason for refusal. And so that's really, because obviously what we need to do, as I said earlier, we need to frame what people are saying, and we'll come back to that. So I wasn't ignoring it, nor was Simon. And we've just checked that we've made similar notes. Is that all right? And I want to really take this vote because we need to move on. I know obviously what the outcome's going to be. So, John, can you run the vote? Thank you. Should have reminded everybody that a vote for it is a vote for the officer's recommendation.
That's fallen 10 against, 2 abstained.
Thank you. We did that as obviously as a formality because we knew where we were with this. So now we need to just probably I need to just have a quick discussion with Simon. Then we'll come back to Councillor Stockley and 1 or 2 other councillors on the points that they've made, whether or not we think they're worth working up. Just give me a couple of minutes. Excuse me, there should be no, sorry, I'm terribly sorry, but there should be no intervention from the public just at this stage. I'm sure you didn't intend to disrupt proceedings, but we can't take a vote if people have not followed and concentrated. Oh, sorry.
Just one thing on this proportion.
Sorry, I thought I was ready, but just a second. Some of the reasons we're not quite sure work, so you may want to add some of these. But I'm prepared, on the basis of this discussion, to propose propose refusal. The grounds that we think add up in terms of planning reasons are the travel is not sustainable, the buses are only every half hour and people will choose a car. And we can work up these if you want to add things. The runoff to the chalk stream, car washing chemicals car washing and chemicals for lawns will find its way into the stream. Residential development differs from agriculture. We probably need to add something to that to say, and could cause different and alternative issues which are not taken care of in the lower level. And I'm not sure if we have an answer to the technicalities that you asked a question about, Ian, but I'll let Simon come back on.
I mean, because of that one, members aren't satisfied.
Yeah, what we need to add is that people are therefore not satisfied that the chalk stream would be sufficiently protected by the measures that are going to be taken. So that's what we need to add to that. We'll do that in a sec. And we're not convinced the development can adequately be accommodated with upgrades to the sewage system, and therefore the development poses a risk of pollution, which would exacerbate the current situation. Members are not convinced, which we know is not going to be dealt with, so we know that's... Members are not convinced that the proposed condition 15 will ensure that adequate sewage disposal will be in place at the time of the development. And yeah, certainty. We think those stack up. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Smith?
Yes, second, Chair.
Thanks.
Yes, Councillor Naomi
Everybody
Smith.
put their hands up, really, but... Sorry? Thank you, everybody. So we have a seconder. Now, we might want to add to or change. We did find a number of things, as I said at the beginning, there are a number of things which may be of concern, but we're not really able to, we're not really able to talk about the agricultural land, for example, because, under current government and, general guidelines, this wouldn't pass that one. We are building on agricultural land all over the district. It might not be good, but that's what we're doing, so it wouldn't be any different. It's not to say it doesn't have a harm, but it's got to be balanced in favour of the fact that we need housing. So it is a relevant point, but it's not one that we can use for refusal. What was the other main one? The other main was the volume of the development. I personally think the volume of the development kind of causes these things, but it's not in and of itself, it's not a material point because, it could potentially, if these problems could be solved, the number of houses on that site might still come through as a consequence of the local plan. And I also thought there were some quite good points myself about the length of time this is going to take to bring through because of all these complications which are all identified, and of course local people have as well. And we do listen to all of that. And I do think there is a point there that this is not going to be an immediate solution as well. But I don't think that's not really, because it's something that's in train, it could come forward quicker than we think, and we can't judge that, and we've got no time frame. So does anybody want to add anything to those conditions? So I think I've got Peter Old first, then Councillor Buttman, and then Councillor Forrester.
I've got 5 reasons based on the current local plan. First of all, policy T1 prioritises walking, cycling and public transport, but this application seems to favour the car. Policy SP3 in our currently adopted local plan requires new rural development to be proportionate. Thirdly, the site is outside the designated village boundary. Fourth, it's not in the local plan 2017, and this is disputed, I understand. EMP 12 talks about protecting best and most versatile farmland. I take your point on that last point. Thank you.
So we think in the context of it not being sustainable, that the agricultural land point could, the current local plan could, of course, we all need to realise that will fail when we get to the next local plan because there'll be different policies. But the T1 we've already got really, but we'll put T1 next to it. What was your other one? Councillor Old, can I just come back to what I said at the beginning? I was in agreement about the proportionality or outside the boundary or whatever, but that's what's causing the other problems. So in a way, I think it's not an additional point, it's the reason for the difficulties. But we think, given that we don't think it's sustainable, we could use the SP3, was it? Yeah. SP3. Okay.
Let me just check SP3.
Okay.
I think the only thing, the question I've got in my mind is this is about stuff that's in accordance with this, but we've got to depart from it.
It's big, it's SP3, it's all these strategic developments.
Yeah, but it doesn't say you can't do it.
I don't think,
SP3 doesn't say you can't. Okay, sorry. Presumption.
I think,
because that just says we will permit.
yes, I was just going to say that I think we may not be able to use SP3 too, because that whole section of the 2017 plan, I was just saying to Simon, if you look at it, it's all kind of coloured in purple. It's all the strategic sites. So it's applicable to those. What we obviously want are things that are going to stand up to whatever is the next stage of this development, and things that we bear in mind if and when this goes, stays in the 2040 plan, and if so, how the developer approaches the issues that we've raised. You see what I mean? Because that's quite important, because this is still a site and it may still be in that, and in which case we need to give clear messages. So we're just checking that SP3, but I think it's applicable to strategic sites. We think that keep the BMV, the best agricultural land one in, but not the SP3. Where am I? I've got Councillor Buckman.
Yeah, it was just to provide, in theory, with some more information on the chalk streams and how it would vary, because you wasn't sure how to frame the protection of the chalk stream. So obviously, at the moment, it's fields, so there is obviously going to be some nitrogen runoff from there, but it must be, at the moment, in balance with the chalk stream. But once the house, the houses and the road development is there, there'll be more oil, heavy metals, salt during the snow. Sorry, go on.
Dane, we have that one.
I thought you said you hadn't had a proper. You were worried. Did you add plastics to that as well? Microplastics entering the chalk stream.
Do you want to add any more?
Well, yeah,
I mean, it's quite.
you get chemicals.
So Dane, you've got some points to add to that point.
Well, it was all to do with that. How what's there at the moment differs is what could be there. As I say, with I think what was mentioned, the petrol, the diesel, salt from the road, oil, heavy metal, and then obviously all the construction stuff that we spoke about earlier. Yeah, the cement, how that enters when you dig the foundations, where that all leaches into. And I'm not sure if it is relevant either about disability access on buses, because anyone who's got a disability needs to use a bus. There's very lack of bus service for those as well.
We've added a few there, Dane. We'll read it back to you in a minute when Simon's finished typing. Councillor Forrester, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was a very small point to come back on my original comment that it's a maximum of every 30 minutes on the buses. That's not consistent. That's not in the evenings. That's not on weekends. I think what you read out initially just said buses are every 30 minutes. And if they were throughout the week, that would be a different proposition. So there are a maximum of every there are a maximum of every 30 minutes. So there are occasions where they are, but there are many occasions where they're far less than that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's fine. I heard that too. At certain times, there's 1 hour, and it's not sufficient. We'll make that more subtle. Make that point more subtle. Councillor Naomi Smith.
It goes back to the transport sustainability and the buses. And it was brought up at the last May when we debated this, was that there's this hedge and the footpath would be inside the hedge and you had to walk up to the bus stop at the top. But if you wanted to, because there's the footpath to the bus stop is on the other side of the road, so you'd have to go all the way down to the Pelican crossing, back up to the top of the hill and then cross, because there isn't actually a footpath on that side, so it's not sustainable. And I wouldn't want to walk behind a hedge if that's not seen, where you can't be seen to get the bus. So that, particularly at night. So it was that thing.
I'm sorry. We can't have contributions. I'm really sorry. This is absolutely how planning committee needs to work. The planning committee now needs to make up its own mind. I'm sorry. I realise people feel strongly about all this. I think we're there. I think we've got enough. Councillor Mackenzie, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just one point I thought of. Colleagues on the planning committee pointed out well about how big this development's going to be compared to what's already there, like a 46% increase, was it, if I remember that right? So paragraph 136 of the NPPF states that development that does not reflect the local character should be refused, and obviously increasing this village by 50% will affect the rural nature and character of Littlebourne, and that could be a reason.
I think we're back to the point, because I did say that I was, wanting to add a point about proportionality, and I think it was, well, a few people mentioned it earlier, but it looks as though that's what causes the problems that we've got about sustainability, and we're better to stick to, sound reasons that we believe this is not going to work, than to add in a lot of other background, which is not necessarily wrong, but so I don't think it's not a separate issue. It's the reasons for the unsustainability. Let's just check this and then perhaps move to a vote, hopefully. Just a second. Okay, I'm going to move to, Dan Smith, you wanted to say something? I'm sorry, we've just finalised all the recommendations now.
Sorry, Pat, I just wanted to add, obviously the chalk stream ones, I think Simon's probably got, I had ALB8B on that, but it occurred to me that obviously this is an increase in the population if we were to put this in significant numbers, and there was a reference in the current local plan for digital infrastructure, which I think we have no information on in terms of people being able to work from home and so on, because you're going to get enormous numbers of traffic movements if people drive somewhere to work, or whatever transport method they use. But obviously if they work from home, you'll need a digital infrastructure as well, and that also may be something that's worth relevant, which I think was EMP6 in the policy.
No, but that's not what he's talking about.
No, but it's a relevant planning reason for rural areas.
Sorry, Dan, did you want another condition or something? I didn't quite get a clear...
Well, I was just suggesting that might be something to consider as to put in there as a reason, because or if Simon thinks it's worthwhile, because nothing was mentioned about the digital infrastructure, and obviously there are traffic movements if people don't work from home because it's a village. So it's one or the other.
We'll just check the policy on that one, okay? We don't think there's anything in the policy that we can, you know, sort of specifically draw on.
I spotted it on EMP6, if that helps.
Sorry?
EMP6, I think it is. Where
I think that's where we are. Just a sec. There's nothing specific about this, the stage of this development. We've got an outline application here. Most of that relates to either new digital infrastructure in retrofitting buildings, or it relates to specific recommendations about digital infrastructure. They would come at a later stage when the outline application was being filled out, as far as we can see.
Of course, but it's the alternative, if you're not considering that, is that the population is increasing and you'll have traffic movements for them to work somewhere else, which is, given Canterbury's infrastructure, it's another highway issues.
As I say, there isn't anything in the report that we can hang that on. So it may be a good point, but you know, in an outline application where you haven't got any comment on it in the report, I think we can leave that out. We're really wanting things that stick, you know. So let's have a look. I want to move to the vote on this, and you know, if you don't like the wording, please tell me. Where we've got to is that reasons for refusal are the location of the development is not sustainable because there are buses a maximum of every half hour and people will choose the car. That's policy T1. We're not convinced that the measures proposed for runoff to chalk stream, oh no, hang on, we've got a word missing here, but that car washing chemicals for lawns will find its way into the stream, chemicals and microplastics from residential development will enter the stream, QL12. We're not convinced the development can adequately be accommodated with upgrades to the sewage system, and therefore the development poses a risk of pollution which will exacerbate the current situation. Members are not convinced proposed conditions 15 will ensure that adequate sewage disposal will be in place at the time of the development, and you need to take that word out, will provide adequate certainty in time for the development, QL12, and BMV, loss of agricultural land, is not acceptable, given that the development is otherwise unsustainable, EMP12. So I think we've got our policies outlined, and Councillor Stopley wants to add another one.
No, it's just on the runoff concerning the chalk stream. I did mention the thousands of tons of concrete which will be poured into the soil. That's not in there. Might be worth putting in.
I think what we need to say at the end of each one is which policy very clearly. This sentence at the end of this one will be at the end of each of them with the relevant policy in it. But now we're saying we're not convinced the measures proposed both during the construction of the development and when the development is occupied are sufficient to ensure the chalk stream will be adequately protected. And chemicals and microplastics generated by the proposed residential development will enter the chalk stream. From chemicals, I know we still need a word out and word in. And the development is therefore contrary to local plan policy QL12. We'll just amend that tiny bit. So we'll add a bit. Councillor Turnbull.
Thanks, Chair. Just
No, this is really, it's a bit tedious trying to write it by committee, but obviously we didn't know, we didn't know before we walked in where we were going to be now, so I'm afraid we've got to do it like this. Carry on,
include
please.
reference to NPPF? Is that something that it is possible to do in this? Because I'm looking at paragraph 187E says preventing new 187E.
Yeah.
Preventing new and existing development from contributing to, being put at unacceptable risk from, or being adversely affected by unacceptable levels of soil, air, water, or noise pollution or land instability. Development should, wherever possible, help to improve local environmental conditions such as air and water quality, etc. (187E).
Right, Pat.
Yes, we'll add that paragraph. Councillor Mackenzie. We are writing by committee. Sorry, everybody, but I think we'll get there. Councillor Mackenzie.
Well, then there is the point that you're going to accept Councillor Turnbull's point from the NPPF, and thanks, thanks for raising that. You should also raise my point that I brought up from the NPPF about the rural character of the village.
Harry, which paragraph was that?
That was paragraph 136.
136, thank you. Harry, are you sure it was 137?
Chair, paragraph 135.
Looking at 135, we're just not quite sure we're going to add anything, but bear with me a minute. Okay. what we've added, landscape harm caused by proposed development is unacceptable given the development is otherwise unsustainable. Same point about BMV, as it would harm the character and setting of the village, contrary to NPPF paragraph 135C and local plan policy LB4. Okay, so are you okay with me just going ahead with the vote? We've read them all out. Oh, Michael.
Can I suggest...
Dixie, sorry, Councillor Dixie. I keep saying people's first names, sorry.
Can I suggest we give delegated authority to you and Simon to polish up what we've come up with tonight?
That's a good idea. As long as we've got the main points down now.
That's exactly. It's
Fine.
polish, I said.
I think we've added enough, and if we've got a few words that we need to sort out, thanks very much, that's lovely. So subject to a bit of polishing up by the head of planning and the chair of planning, please can we move to the vote, John? And a vote in favour is a vote to refuse this application on those grounds that I have read out. 5 grounds now we've got. Thank you.
That's carried unanimous.
I'm glad you have that. Thank you very much, everybody. Just let me check. I don't think we have any other items. There's no urgent business to be... Oh, Councillor Old, did you want to...
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. Discussion about presumption has been central to the deliberations this evening. I, for one, would benefit from knowing what the current position is, where we stand in terms of presumption, what the shortfall is, what the target is, and the forecast of when we might be out of presumption. And could I ask if we could have a paper at the earliest opportunity that sets out all those considerations for our information, and so we can understand things better in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Old and committee, Simon is offering to do such a thing. We'll have an email briefing note. And thank you, Councillor Old. Are there any other businesses? Because I have no special notifications noted to me, and we don't have any appeals, and I don't have any other business. Is that okay? Date of the next meeting, Tuesday, 22nd of July, and thank you very much. And thank you very much for the public. I'm sorry we had a long time to deliberate, but hope it's been worth it in the end. Thank you.